generations to come.
Welcome to another edition of the TDN Writers Room. My name is Bill Finley. I'm a correspondent for the Thoroughbred Daily News, and I just got back from a week in sunny Florida. I hope you guys got along without me.
Hey, we did. Somehow we managed. I'm Randy Moss with NBC Sports. Just hired a personal trainer. I'll be trying out for the quarterback position of the Minnesota Vikings. I know I'm a big long shot, but hey, I'll settle for 1% of what Kirk Cousins will be making next year for the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah, really? 1%? I'll take like a tenth of that. I'll be just fine on that. I'm Zoe Cabin with First Racing and Santa Anita. I am here in one of the palatial conference rooms at the OBS sales. I have the sales in front of me. We have started selling horses already. Today is Tuesday. The sun is shining, and it is absolutely glorious here.
All right, guys, last weekend, especially for this time of year, not a lot in particular going on, but we did have the Tampa Bay Derby. And the story that people are going to remember from the Tampa Bay Derby was he couldn't bet on the damn thing. We're going to save that for a little bit later. First, we're just going to discuss the race. Domestic product wins for Chad Brown in a very thrilling finish. Got only an 82 buyer. He did come from not well off the pace, but a little bit off the pace in very, very slow fractions. I try never to underestimate a Chad Brown horse, but doesn't look like, considering the speed figure and the quality of the field, he really belongs in the top tier for the thoroughbreds of going into the Kentucky Derby.
Ooh, I'm going to disagree with you, but you go first, Randy.
No, go ahead, Zoe. I want to hear yours.
Zoe.
Okay. I think he's a good horse. He's a homebred for Klaravich. That was a really, really good race for him. They took the blinkers off in his start before. He was still a little bit rank. He managed to settle off the pace. Tyler Gaffalione always had horse. It was just a question of somewhere to go. Now, Javier Castellano on No More Time should have gone on. I mean, they went 25-1, 51, 116-1. And when he clocked off that 3/4 in a 2-minute lick in 116, he should have pressed the button and gone on. And I'm not sure Domestic Product would have caught No More Time for Rich Mendez Racing. But Domestic Product got through. And if you watch them come down the lane, he is twice the size of No More Time. I love the fact he relaxed. I liked his acceleration. It was a slowly run race. Didn't get it big by a speed figure. But I firmly believe he is a good horse with more to come because he's still figuring things out, and he is beautiful.
Well, Zoe, can I just, the thing that you hear whenever there's a race like this, and I agree with everything you said, but who did he beat?
Doesn't matter.
It's not a strong field.
I know, but he can't help who he ran against. It was a learning experience for him, in my opinion. And No More Time, I know that the connections, Rich Mendez, who may be the most interesting man in horse racing, by the way, we're going to get him on this podcast one of these days. They were not real happy with the ride. They wish he'd have gone on. They're very happy they garnered some points, and they're going to try and send No More Time to the Derby with 45 points and no more runs. But I'm just looking at the optics of the race and how good Domestic Product ran after actually finally settling in a race. And I actually ran into Chad Brown here at the sale, and he was delighted with him. He's a good horse.
Randy, break the tie.
Well, look, you know I'm a buyer speed figure guy. Obviously, yeah. I help make the buyer speed figures, but I have no problem in this particular situation saying that in a race like the Tampa Bay Derby, the way it was run, you have to take the buyer speed figure with a grain of salt. I won't say it's completely irrelevant, but when you go 25.25 for the quarter, 51.14 for the half, and 116.21 for 6 furlongs, that doesn't really lend itself to any kind of a fast buyer speed figure. It was run like a turf race. Let's face it. And we see turf races time and time again with very close margins at the end because horses don't really have time to separate that much. They're only asked to run for about the final quarter of a mile. And much to the connections of No More Time chagrin, that's exactly what happened in the Tampa Bay Derby. All the riders just sat there until the quarter pole and then went on with it. And as a result, you had a blanket finish at the end. I think Domestic Product is potentially a really nice horse. I like the way he strided out in the final quarter mile. They all finished fast in the final quarter mile. The race itself went 23-1 for the final quarter. But we didn't learn much, in my opinion, from the Tampa Bay Derby. I think what we're really going to learn about Domestic Product is going to be what we see in either the Bluegrass Stakes or the Wood Memorial, whichever race that they will use for the final prep. And hopefully it'll be a little bit more of a truly run race than the Tampa Bay Derby was. They're passing the prep for No More Time, as Zoe mentioned, primarily because he's a smallish horse, obviously much smaller than Domestic Product. They said after the Sam Davis that race took a lot out of him and that he was going to have to bounce back from that. So he's not really the type of horse that they want to give one more race to between the Tampa Bay Derby and the Kentucky Derby. As far as his prospects for going on 1.25 miles, it's interesting. He's by the sire Practical Joke. So Domestic Product has already one-upped his stallion, who never won a race around 2 turns. Domestic Product has now won twice around 2 turns, including 1.8 miles. The 2 highest earning offspring of Practical Joke are Tejano Twist and Skelly, who are both sprinters. But last year, if you recall, the Santa Anita Derby winner, Practical Move, was a son of Practical Joke. And it certainly appeared like distance was going to be no problem for Practical Move. So pedigree-wise, I think the jury is still out. But I can't really break the tie, Bill. I'm going to wait until the Bluegrass or the Wood when we can learn a little bit more about the horse.
All right, fair enough. And of course, the other story is Chad Brown, who looks normally is not a very strong Kentucky Derby trainer. He's just not Bob Baffert or Todd Pletcher, but he's got at least 2 horses, including Sierra Leone, who is very impressive in the Risen Star. So we'll see how Chad does on the road to the Kentucky Derby. Okay, so let's head out to the West Coast, where there was not a Kentucky Derby prep race this weekend, but there was a Kentucky Oaks prep race. But I have to put air quotes around that, because here we go again. The horse that won looks like a special horse, Kinza. She's 3 for 3. She annihilates her competition every single time she runs. At this point in time, I think she's clearly the number 1 filly in the country. And because Churchill Downs did something stupid and banned Bob Baffert an extra year above and beyond an already very serious punishment, they're not going to have the best in Nysos. They're probably not going to have the best 3-year-old colt in the Kentucky Derby. And in Kinza, they're probably not going to have the best 3-year-old filly in the Kentucky Oaks. It's just a shame. I mean, to think these great races are not going to bring together all the horses that belong in them because, Baffert is so strong.
Sure. Kinza's good. She's good, but she runs hot. And she ran hot again in the last Vergennes. And she's still, she's not really beating anything, let's be perfectly honest, but she's doing it very easily. We'll have to see. The jury is still out with me on the Daughter of Carpe Diem. She was sold for $350,000. They paid $30,000 for her. Dave McCathin's Grassroots consigned her at the Maryland sale, the Fazit Tipton Maryland sale last year. And she's quick. And she's never been headed around 2 turns. But she does run hot. I'll give her that much. So Bob's been able to keep the boil off her. Like, she hasn't boiled over just yet, which is great.
I don't want to overdose people on speed figure talk, but, there are a lot of handicappers out there that pay a lot of attention to speed figures, Beyer speed figures and others. And since we talked about the Tampa Bay Derby having a suppressed speed figure primarily because of the pace, I can also tell you, and you have to judge speed figures by the way they're run, the way the races are run. In this case, Kinza got a Beyer speed figure of, I believe, 92. And it was also suppressed a little bit, I think, by the fractions that Kinza set. Just the opposite of the Tampa Bay Derby. She went 22.52, 45.98. She's not going to keep running at that pace. She's going to slow down a little bit. And still, she earned a 92 Beyer. She absolutely ran the horses that were right behind her completely out of the race. I mean, they all came back with suppressed numbers compared to what they had been running because they just couldn't keep up that tempo. So I think even though she gets a 92 Beyer speed figure down the road, you can look at that race as more like a 97 or a 98 from a handicapping perspective, because I think that's kind of the quality of the race that she ran. If the Kentucky Oaks were going to be run in 3 weeks or a month and she was in it, I think she'd be a 4 to 5 or an even money favorite. And I think it's very unfortunate that she's not going to be able to run. It appears right now, we'll have more on this later, maybe Churchill Downs might be catching a little bit of a break in the Nisos department. Based on his workout schedule, he's now missed 2 published workouts since his last official workout. There's something going on there with Nisos. We'll probably hear more about that coming up. Hopefully it's not something that, too terribly bad. It's not like they're having to press him to make the Kentucky Derby. They can afford to take their time with him a little bit more. But we'll see what's going on with Nisos probably in the next few weeks.
Now let's turn our attention to the Beholder Mile, a grade 1 on the Saturday card at Santa Anita. And Adair Manor for Baffert has been so consistent over the years, and she's so tough. She ran a good race. She ran second, but she got beat by a horse that I think we're going to probably hear more from this year, Sweet Azteca, who got 103 Beyer. I wonder if she's the fastest horse of the week, but don't spoil that yet, Randy, for us, with 103 Beyer. And the thing about her was she was very lightly raced, and this was her first start around 2 turns. So she had some obstacles in her way. She handled them quite well. And right now, she looks like maybe she's better than Adair Manor, but we'll see those 2 horses perhaps hook up again through the big races for older fillies and mares out in Southern California. But Sweet Azteca looks like a pretty decent prospect.
Yeah, she got the jump on Adair Manor. She certainly did. She's got a little bit of zip to her. If you remember, Michael McCarthy won this race back in 2020 with Cece. And I don't think we've seen the best of Sweet Azteca yet. There's a lot more under the hood, or the bonnet, should I say. Do you know what a bonnet is, Randy?
Yes, I have been to London. I know what a windscreen is. I know what a loo is, and I know what a bonnet is. Yes.
What about a boot? Do you know what a boot is?
No.
That's a hood of a trunk, right?
Yes, very good.
Yay.
Wow. Well, how about that? We have another Anglophile. I'm outnumbered.
Right. All right, let's talk about Keeneland. The TDN Writers' Room is brought to you by Keeneland. Entries are now open for the 2024 April of Horses Racing Age sale. The sale will be held on Friday, April the 26th, after the races on closing day of the spring meet. Entry deadline for the print catalog is April the 1st. Supplements will continue to be considered until the sales date. We'll be right back after this message from Keeneland.
At Keeneland, a horse will always be measured in hands. Hands that see, that sense, that speak. Hands that hold our sport to a higher standard. Not for our sake, but for theirs. For the love of the horse, for generations to come.
This week, our Fastest Horse of the Week segment is being brought to you by Audible, one of those fast sires at WinStar Farm. As a 3-year-old, Audible hit the board in all 5 of his starts, and those were all stakes races. He won 3 of them, including the Florida Derby and the Holy Bull, and ran 3rd in the Kentucky Derby. And Audible's Holy Bull time of 141.92 for a mile and a 16th was the fastest in that race since 2013. And now Audible is off to a great start at stud. He's the leading second crop sire by earnings, by black type winners, by graded stakes winners, by graded stakes horses, and by winners. And best of all, you can get all that for just $15,000 at WinStar Farm. Now, for the Fastest Horse of the Week, I appreciate it very much that Bill didn't spoil it. It is Sweet Azteca with her 103 Beyer speed figure in that B. Wayne Hughes Beholder Mile. That ranks as the fastest Beyer by any female racehorse thus far in 2024. And by the way, I'm very proud of my filly Adair Manor for her gallant effort in defeat. She ran the race of her life in the Beholder Mile and still couldn't beat Sweet Azteca. One note here, Sweet Azteca owned by Pamela Zybarth. She traces back to that family's sensational broodmare, Seas Tizzy, who was Sweet Azteca's fourth dam. Sea Song, who was Sweet Azteca's fourth dam. Sea Song produced Tiz Now, produced Bud Royale. The full sister of Tiz Now was called Tiz Sweet. That's Sweet Azteca's third dam. So it's a big family affair. All those big horses, Sea Song, Tiz Now, Tiz Sweet, Bud Royale, were all bred by Pamela Zybarth's mother, the late Cecilia Straub Rubin. So congratulations to Pamela Zybarth and to Sweet Azteca, this week's fastest horse of the week.
Did Randy just go down the rabbit hole in the fastest horse of the week?
I did.
He just can't help himself, Zoe.
No, I clawed my way back out of it at the end, but yes I did.
Yeah, the fifth dam on the cross of this or that ran a big buyer back in 1973. Yeah.
Okay. Fifth dam? Let me see if I can find the fifth dam. I've got it here somewhere. Oh.
All right. So let's get back to Tampa Bay Downs. And like I said, the story that people will remember more so than the race was that it was a race you couldn't bet on. And what happened was there was and all this techno stuff gets me a little bit confused, but there was a breakdown in the company that carries transmits the information back and forth. So when you make a bet, if Randy makes a bet at Canterbury Downs on the Tampa Bay Derby, it first goes to the tote company, in this case, Amtote, and then Roberts Communications transmits it from Amtote to the track for the Tampa Bay Derby. We've all had it. We've had our internet go out. And, there's nothing you can do about it other than just be frustrated and wait for it to come back on. But, it was a huge deal because, first of all, Tampa Bay Downs is one of those tracks that has no outside income from slots or casinos or anything like that. The general manager there, Peter Berube, said that this cost him $4.5 million in handle, and he has called for an investigation. He was not pleased. So, as I wrote in the TDN, you can't blame Amtote. You can't blame Roberts Communications. You can't blame Tampa Bay Downs. Having said that, why is it these things always happen in horse racing? And, we had the other problem recently where the guys were making the bets on FanDuel where you could box 20 horses for a 10-cent superfecta and all they charge in your account was 10 cents. I realize these aren't easy problems to fix, but Randy, it reminds me of all the things you and I used to talk about and write about, but the horrible timing system of GPS. It's 2024. Time the races right and don't ever have a situation where there's no betting, particularly on a big race. People smarter than me, people that make a lot more money than me, need to get together and figure out how this will never happen again.
Yeah, and they're turning over every rock right now with Roberts Communications, with Amtote, to try to figure out what the heck was going on. There were still some issues with the communications on Sunday that Amtote was able to work around and create a patch for. So hopefully this is one of those situations where this will, the end result will be maybe a little bit more betting security and a little bit less likely that some of this might happen in the future. One thing that I didn't really understand about the whole thing, and I still don't, I tried to put in an email to Peter Berube, but he didn't respond or hasn't yet. And a lot of horse players didn't really understand this as well. There were daily doubles, pick threes, pick fours, and pick fives that all ended with the Tampa Bay Derby, which means they had been placed before the outage, before the malfunction. And yet it was a decision by Tampa Bay Downs as a house rule, so to speak, to treat the Tampa Bay Derby result as all. So a pick five, for example, that ended with the Tampa Bay Derby, if you had single domestic product and you were in line for a nice payoff, and you obviously had that bet in 5 races earlier, and suddenly it's paid off with all in the Tampa Bay Derby instead of domestic product. I don't really understand why. I'm going to assume that it's just because they couldn't get the communication about all the other bets that were placed. As we all know, 90% of the bets nowadays in this country at any racetrack on any given day are placed remotely a lot of those by ADWs. And maybe with the communication, they couldn't quite get everything in line within a certain amount of time that they felt like they needed to have the results posted. But anyway, that was a real unusual part of this whole equation that I know a lot of horse players out there were frustrated about. But hey, horse players get frustrated all the time, right, guys?
Yeah, they certainly do. And there were an awful lot of frustrated ones. You just had to look at Twitter and you'll find that out. And I mean, let's face it, Tampa Bay estimated that they lost $4.5 million in betting revenue on the Tampa Bay Derby, and the fact they had to cancel race number 12 as well. And they tried as long as they could. They delayed it about an hour because I just got done looking at horses and I'm like, I missed the Tampa Bay Derby and was going to watch the replay. And I put on Express Bet. I'm like, they're still in the paddock. What is going on? And it wasn't just Tampa. It was all across the country. I mean, Santa Anita, Gulfstream, they weren't affected quite as badly, but they did delay their post-parades. They tacked on 5 minutes and they just tried to push everything. But again, something needs to be resolved. And again, we always say something needs to be resolved, and we don't know how to resolve it. It's just it's so frustrating.
Yeah, absolutely. After we're going to have a couple messages coming up, and after that, we're going to have an interview with Rusty Arnold, who's going to talk about his situation getting a positive from the Horse Racing Integrity and Welfare Unit and why he says that it's not fair. That'll be a very interesting interview when we come back after this.
The TDN Writers Room also brought to you by the Pennsylvania Horse Breeders Association. Here's a PHBA fact. Last year, they paid out over $30 million in breeders' incentives. And over the last 10 years, the PHBA has averaged paying out $28.5 million a year in awards. And those awards were distributed not just to a handful of wealthy participants, but among 376 breeders. The top PA breeder last year, an outfit called Uptown Charlie Brown Stud, received over $868,000. PA breds run at 3 tracks, obviously. They run at Parks, Presque Isle Downs, and Penn National within the state of Pennsylvania. They run on dirt, grass, and Topeka, and in 350 race cards annually. So for more information about what you can earn with a PA bred, call the PA Horse Breeders at 610-444-1050. That's 610-444-1050, or go to pabred.com.
The state of Pennsylvania has the best breeders program in the entire United States.
When you buy a yearling, it's a little bit like buying a lottery ticket. And we are trying to provide the lottery ticket that the likelihood is to hit the jackpot.
Angel of Empire wins the Arkansas Derby and wins it clear.
Uncle Heavy late, it's a photo finish.
Pennsylvania and the PHBA have the best state-bred program in the country, bar none.
The winner, Uncle Heavy. He's a 3-year-old bred in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, we went there looking for a Tiz the Law, and we wanted to try to buy the best Tiz the Law colt we can buy. We fell upon him and said, he's the one. Then you get home, and he is the horse. It's fun to see what you saw in September, and now comes March, and he's even better. He's real push button, this horse, so when you ask him, he keeps that in his little computer in his head. Next time you go out, he's waiting for you to push the button to ask. I was tremendously excited when we bought him, and now I'm even more excited to be able to show him. He's a rocket ship, actually.
This week's Coolmore Stallion of the Week is Pandemic Belmont winner Tiz the Law, and we're going to be asking Zoe about the first crop sires at OBS, where she is ensconced right now. That'll be a little bit later in the podcast, but it seems like right now there is a lot to like about Tiz the Law. It's that time of the podcast. The TDN Writers Room brought to you by the Green Group, a tax accounting and advisory firm specializing in the thoroughbred industry and designed to save you money on taxes.
And welcome in now the Green Group guest of the week. It's trainer Rusty Arnold. And he has been in the news lately. News he wishes, of course, didn't happen. But here are the facts. The HISA/HIWU has hit him with a 7-day suspension and a $1,000 fine for a positive for tramadol. And Rusty didn't take this quietly. He's fighting it. He wants to have his voice be heard. And Rusty, I guess we can start with this. In the op-ed that you wrote for the Thoroughbred Daily News, I'm reading verbatim. I have no issue that I have a positive post-race test. The problem is, why is it a positive? So could you elaborate on that and start with that theme?
Under the current HISA rules, HISA rules, the horse tested positive for tramadol, and it came back with a very, very minute trace of tramadol, and the split confirmed it, and so I can't deny that the horse raced without tramadol in it. So yeah, I took my positive, and I didn't argue it. I didn't say anything. But after taking it, I wanted to point out I don't think it's fair. I don't think the system is right on these trace limits, and I'm trying to create, whether it works or not, I don't know. I'm trying to create some positive movement to change the rules, some positive change.
And your primary issue, correct me if I'm wrong, is the likelihood, in this case, anybody that knows you and has been around you would consider it a 100% likelihood that the tramadol positive came as a result of contamination. Is that correct? Is that your primary problem with the situation as it now stands?
Randy, that's correct. I mean, in my opinion, I have no doubt that it came from contamination. I think they don't agree with that. But in my major objection is it is such a minute example that in today's society, there is no such thing as zero tolerance. There needs to be a level that if it's under a level, any medication, that it's not a positive, if it shows in there that is performance enhancing. And I think this is a clear case of it. I'm not trying to defend myself. I wanted that clear to everybody. Mine's done. I'm trying to move forward. I'm trying to make a positive change because too many people are getting in this situation right now. It's one every day, one every few days, and I disagree with it, and I'm hoping we can make a little change on it. Don't know if we can after reading her letter today. I think they're going to dig their toes because it is a non-therapeutic drug. And I understand it's a non-therapeutic drug, and they will let you have a contamination, it appears by her letter, if they approve the drug that you're contaminated with. I mean, I thought that article was unbelievable. Like, well, you weren't one of the drugs that we have allowed to be contaminated with. So, my horse had the audacity to get contaminated with a drug that wasn't on their list.
So, Randy, if we go back to 2018, you had a positive for ractopamine, which you're absolved of. It was a horse feed contaminant. We fast forward now. What has changed in the last few years? Because it seems, even though that was, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, nothing has changed on the backside as far as contaminants. It's the same dirty stalls. It's the same... we've all been on the backside. We've seen the test barns. Nothing's clean. There are contaminants everywhere. What can be done to help the situation right now?
Well, there's only two things on that. One is they never proceeded with that ractopamine. They themselves dropped it. Right. So I didn't have to defend myself. I didn't have to do anything. They dropped the case because there were so many in the feed. Your feed was coming from feedlots that actually mixed feed for other animals that ractopamine was legal in, so they dropped it. There was 10 in Iowa, there was some in Kentucky, so that never went through. So I think it's an easy fix. HISA does not think it's an easy fix. There has to be a tolerance level developed by them, their level, to where they can say, this has it in there, but there is absolutely zero effect on the horse. And when it's that small a number, we're not going to call it a positive. I think the level in a person, I'm not a scientist. I don't want to make a mistake on these numbers, but I think the level in a person is 50 nanograms before it has any effect. My horse had three. And I'm not defending myself, but and stop all of this, give us a level that we can work with, that if it's under that, you're not positive. And I think there has to be a tolerance level. I think it only makes common sense in today's society. There's 30 million prescriptions for tramadol out there, 30 million. And these conditions in these receiving barns are not good. Nobody's fault. They use the barn at Turfway in the morning for ship installs. Horses worked in and work and go stalls. They were in the barn this morning, worked out. In the barn yesterday morning, worked out. Those stalls aren't pristine when we move in them to run tonight. It won't be tonight, but it might be tomorrow. They can clean them all they want.
So, Rusty, in Lisa Lazarus's counterpoint argument to this, one thing that she points out is that the sanctions for this particular medication are now less severe under HISA than they were under the old system. So is this a HISA problem or is this a horse racing problem? Because, I think what they're trying to argue here is nothing's really changed. Now, you should say this thing should have changed for the better, but it doesn't seem that things have changed for the worse. So is HISA guilty here, or is just the bigger system that we've had for years and years and years that totally needs to be reexamined?
Well, first of all, every time I read in the paper, Lisa says, we're the law of the land. We're going nowhere and we're the law of the land. Why bring up what it used to be? It doesn't matter what it used to be. I'm dealing with the laws as they're put to me by HISA/HIWU. That's what we're dealing with. It's like going back and saying the speed limit used to be 60 and now it's 50, and I wouldn't have been guilty for speeding. I don't know what they were. They probably were more severe, so I'm reading in her article, but I can only deal with what I'm dealing with now. And I'm not trying to get in a fight with Lisa Lazarus. I'm trying to make a productive change so that I think so many innocent, honest trainers are getting convicted and getting their reputations trashed, getting their finances trashed right now on these positives that they have no control over. I think what's lucky about mine is I'm not going to a lawyer. I'm not asking for help. I know what happened. I know we didn't do it. The truth's on my side. It's not on his side. This horse was not treated with tramadol in my barn, and it got it, and we think they can even prove it if they want to, that it got it within the 8 hours of the race. It is highly probable by my experts that this horse got tramadol transferred to it within the 8 hours of the race. Probable. And I think they could prove that if they wanted to, but they don't need to.
So obviously contamination has been an issue in thoroughbred racing and medication and positive tests for a long, long time. And I'd like to get your opinion on this. To me, this is the catch-22. To me, this is where a lot of racing fans and maybe even people in the industry would come down. Almost everybody believes, anybody that knows you believes, that this tramadol situation is a case of contamination. And, 90+% of all the trainers out there are honest. They're not trying to skirt the rules. They're not trying to give horses illegal medications. But you have a few who would. And invariably, if they get caught with the positive test, the very first thing they're going to say is, I didn't give this to the horse. It was contamination. If Jason Service and Jorge Navarro had been busted with a positive test, which they weren't, they were convicted as the result of wiretaps, undoubtedly their defense would have been, we didn't give anything to the horses. It was contamination. So how do you distinguish between the legitimate contaminations that would be the vast majority without also, not considering the guys that might be trying to game the system? How do you do that?
Randy, my thought is, if you have a tolerance level that they can prove, and this would be, I'm not a scientist, this would have to be HIWU to say, up to this amount, it will have no performance enhancement on this horse. You go above that, I understand, I'm with you. Nobody that I know, no trainer that I deal with wants drugs in racing. They don't want these horses to be drugged. But we also, on the other hand, there is only so much we can do. You've seen the shape of these ship installs. What can we do? And I know we're walking a tightrope right here as far as, is it going to let somebody cheat? if you had such a level that say, hey, this, whether it be 50 nanograms like they say is in a person, if up to that, there is a very good chance that this was contamination. Over that, it was probably given or intentional. I don't know that I have all the answers, but I do think a lot of people are getting trashed right now that are very honest and are doing nothing wrong. They're just hardworking people, and they're getting trashed right now under the system we're dealing with. I'm not saying it's any different. I'm not saying I wouldn't be having this same conversation before HISA took over, but right now is what we're dealing with. I know I made it 48 years without getting days, and now I've got them. So that the system that's the way the systems work for me right now.
So the threshold levels before and now have been set in consultation, supposedly, with scientists and veterinary experts and pharmacologists. Do you think they need to be revisited in general?
Well, I don't think there is a threshold level if it's a certain med, is my understanding. They don't care what it is; it's zero tolerance, and that's what I'm fighting. That there is no zero tolerance.
Rusty, what has been the talk at the track with your peers and other trainers? Because you're very well respected. We all like you. You're a great guy. You're a good trainer. People respect you, and they're like, you know, I'm down at OBS right now, and you're the talk of the town. Like, Randy's not a cheater. Like, what has been the comeback from everybody else, and how we rectify this? And what's the general consensus on the racetrack about this?
Well, I wasn't trying to be a martyr. I tried to speak up, and again, I didn't want it against myself. I didn't defend myself. I made sure that was very clear in the end. Trying to make a change going forward. I think the response has been very good. A little bit overwhelming, actually. I answered over 300 and some emails or texts within the next 48 hours. I would say 99.9% were positive and support. Several from Jockey Club members, which very surprised me. And the one thing that was the theme that echoed between every one of them was, this isn't what we signed up for. This isn't what we thought it was going to be. We thought we were going to catch guys that were clearly cheating. We didn't know that the everyday guy that's out there trying to do his job was going to be snared by the gotcha mentality of Highwood.
So can I ask you, like, coming into this, just a generalized question, pro HISA, for HISA, like, what's your general feeling before this all started?
Well, I haven't changed at all. I have no problems with HISA, and I would probably be a HISA backer. But I don't think that they should resist coming to the table and speaking about some positive changes. Many talks with Lisa. Most of them are positive. We're on a different side of something right now. She dug in her heels a little bit about, this is a bad drug. I think they. Her article was pretty much sensationalized to let everybody know how bad tramadol is. I know how bad tramadol is. I did not admit that the horse raced with tramadol. We got a science lesson in tramadol in the first part of her letter. What she failed to put in there was, in all probability, my horse had zero performance enhancing in it. There was zero chance of that. And it was a very, very probable from my expert that it got it within the 8 hours of the race, which is in a receiving barn because of the half-life. I'm not a scientist. I don't know. But I do think one thing I wanted to address in Lisa's letter is she talked about the things we can do. Two of them, one being you've got to stop people from peeing in your stalls. Well, I can stop it in my barn, and Ron Marquette and Steve Asmussen, everything can stop it in their own barn. I can't stop it in a receiving barn. I have no control over the receiving barn whatsoever. I don't have control the dark day before it's there. I don't have control the hours before we get there. But the number two one that probably upset me the most of everything is she said we've got to work stronger on video surveillance. And it almost jumped off the page at me. I have offered them, we have state-of-the-art video surveillance at Keeneland. Dr. Brown put it in. It's better than anybody. It's better than Walmart. I can see people's faces in my stalls 24/7. I offered that to Highwoo with my initial response. That's why I sent you that letter. Never responded to me. I offered it to them the second time. Never responded to me. The third time they said, we don't need it. We're satisfied that you're guilty. Never. Why do I have 24/7 surveillance in my stalls available to them, and they don't want it. Somebody give me the answer to that.
Can you talk to me about the half-life? Because we read the letter and you're referring to tramadol and the half-life and the receiving barn. Can you just explain that to people that are listening?
Well, I was just, again, not an expert on medication, but I was told that the half-life of tramadol in that letter drops really, really quick. So if it would receive this tramadol way back, that it would be not in the system at all, that it had to be done closer to the race. That's what I was told. I don't know anything about tramadol. I don't know how it gets there, when it goes out, but I've been told that it was, in all probability, was contacted the horse close to the race. So in the receiving barn, we're in there about 8 hours. The horses that go in there in the morning, they're in, they work, they go out in those stalls. They have them cleaned. We go in at night, we're in them, we go out. And I don't think what I don't think is the stalls are getting clean to the standard that they're testing to.
I can see that.
Rusty, I would say that this isn't the first type of this kind of story that we've heard. We've been reporting on these sort of things. We've been talking about them on the podcast. One thing I would say about HISA is that they have been pretty good about admitting, well, they might not call it mistakes, but that they will say, look at something and say, this could have been done better and done right. And, so they have moved away from the very draconian rules they had in place when they first started, and they are not more lenient when it comes to some of these things. Not with your case, though. But do you see any hope on the horizon? Has Lisa Lazarus given you any indication that the things you are suggesting, which to me, and I'm not a scientist nor am I a horse trainer, but they seem to make sense, that they will listen to you and that maybe you will be the person who brings about some changes here?
Well, I think Lisa listens very well. I think I'm hoping that there'll be some change. Maybe she'll have some reasons that they can't change. Again, there maybe science is going to say, hey, if somebody can get by with 3 nanograms, they'll push for 10. I don't know, but I do agree with you. We're reading these stories too much every day right now. There are too many people that I don't think are cheaters. I don't think their intent is to cheat. And I think it makes us look bad, for one thing, also. So I think it's got to be slowed down. And hopefully, if all it cost me was 7 days and one person and $1,000 fine, and if we can make a positive change, it was well worth it.
Meanwhile, life's not that bad for Rusty Arnold. You've got a nice palm tree right behind you that Bill and I are very jealous of right now. Zoe's in Ocala. There's probably a palm tree up there somewhere, although you can't tell. You're in a pretty good spot there, Rusty.
Yeah, life's not bad at all. I'm in my kitchen looking out the back door. It's about 75 degrees and couldn't be better. Life's not bad. A little bit of a hiccup, a little bit of bump in the road.
How's your golf game and how's Red Carpet Ready? This is what I really want to talk about.
I'm going to make it easy. I don't play golf anymore. Haven't played in about 5 years. And Red Carpet Ready is great. I was extremely proud of her comeback. Really, really nice race to come off the shelf. She did it. She came out of the race good and onward back to Kentucky.
Well, Rusty, thank you so much for your time. This is a fascinating and difficult subject. You've come up with some solutions and they make some sense, but got to admit that this is obviously not something that can be easily solved, but you're to be commended for fighting for your rights. And we thank you for being this week's Green Group Guest of the Week on the TDN Writers Room podcast.
For graciously agreeing to be the Green Group Guest of the Week, Mr. Rusty Arnold will receive a free 1-hour text consultation from the Green Group. For more information, again, on how the Green Group can save you money right there in the old pocketbook, www.greenco.com.
Are you paying too much in taxes? The Green Group can help. There's a reason the most successful owners, breeders, and horsemen select the Green Group as their tax advisors. They save you money and share successful strategies. Over the past 40 years, the Green Group founder, Len Green, has owned and bred some of the best racehorses in the history of the sport, like Eclipse Award-winning champions Jaywalk and Wonderwheel. His DJ stable competes at the highest level and has received the game's most prestigious honors. Len Green's in-depth, hands-on industry knowledge, combined with cutting-edge tax-saving strategies, has produced positive results for his clientele and has made the Green Group the top-rated accounting and tax firm in the Thoroughbred business. For a confidential and complimentary consultation, contact us at 732-634-5100 or visit our website at www.greenco.com. The Green Group, proven strategies to save you taxes.
With some of the fullest fields in the country and quality racing year-round, there's never been a better time to reap the rewards of breeding and racing in Kentucky. Purse money in Kentucky is at an all-time high, as is average purse per race, outpacing California, Florida, and New York. Kentucky breds. Breed them, raise them, race them. We all win.
So all these big races we've been recapping the last couple of weeks have one thing in common. Santa Anita Handicap winner Newgate, Kentucky bred. Kilroe Mile winner Du Jour, Kentucky bred. Even at Maidan, the Burj Nahar went to Laurel River, and the Not Al Sheba Turf Sprint went to Frost the Dawn, Kentucky bred. Kentucky bred. And the newest horse on the Kentucky Derby trail that we've already talked about, Domestic Product, on a practical joke, Kentucky bred. Find your Kentucky bred this week at the OBS March sale. Kentucky breds, breed them, raise them, race them. We all win. And now, first things first.
All right, well, you know I'm all in Ocala right now. So this week's edition of First Things First, our own Michelle Yu caught up with owner breeder Pam Zebath to talk about, we already mentioned her, that brilliant Grey filly who beat your favorite 5-year-old mare, Randy, in a dare manner. We're going to listen to how she thinks Sweet Azteca ran.
Well, if there's a way to make a Grade 1 any sweeter, it's to have a homebred Grade 1 winner. I'm joined by Pamela Zebath, the owner and breeder. Can you describe your emotions right now?
I was telling them in the paddock that the best picture we have is of Flavian on her mom down at Del Mar. So I was like, let's do this again. Now we have 4 siblings right now, and she's carrying another Sharp Azteca.
Oh, so nice to have a full ride. So you're excited here. What were your thoughts coming down the lane? Because she was in front, seemed to be pretty comfortable, but here comes the favorite breathing down her neck.
Well, I'm like, okay, let's kick in the 12 links.
Was she, did Michael say after that last race, did she come back with some confidence?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, loads of confidence. The whole team had more confidence that this is really it. I mean, I think the Grade 3 was a fluke, just new place, new noises. Yeah.
Looking back at her pedigree, I would say I wasn't sure about the 2 turns, especially how quick she was. Were you confident that 2 turns was going to be up her alley?
I felt she could do it, yeah. And especially after talking to Michael, he goes, she has so much left after her work. It's just like, it's in there. So, yeah, we're really pleased.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
A very nice homebred victory for Sweet Azteca as a Grade 1 winner.
Thanks, Michelle. Catching up with Pam Zebath. Do want to remind you that post time now at Santa Anita will be 1 p.m. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday due to the time change. We do have some good stakes coming this weekend. We'll have the San Carlos. Looks like perhaps Elwood Blues, Forbidden Kingdom, Mystification, I'm a Gambler, and perhaps Parnelli may be going forward as one of 3 stakes this weekend at Santa Anita.
Well, we've been talking loud about OBS, and our very own Zoe Cadman is there, right in the thick of things. And Zoe, I think one thing that makes this particular sale so exciting, it's the first chance you get to see how the first crop sires, how their offspring are performing on the track, how people regard them, etc. And, I think the one question, I write a story about this every year, who among the freshman sires is getting all the buzz? Who's going to be the one this year?
There's plenty of buzz down here at OBS. We had a good breeze show. I really like the Vacomas. He's a son of Candy Ride. He stands at Spendthrift for $15,000. It's a Grade 1 winner out of a Grade 1 winner by a Grade 1 winner. And they really get over the track really nicely. And I'm not the only one that agrees with that. He was a brilliant racehorse. So Vacoma, volatile, I mean, I'm sticking with the V's. He, again, stands for 15,000 at Three Chimneys. His babies have been working very, very well. And then we already mentioned Tis the Law. I just looked up and I just saw a Tis the Law go through for 750,000. He stands at Coolmore. Now, I think a lot of people have forgotten how good a racehorse Tis the Law was. He's by Constitution, and he's already a better racehorse than Constitution ever was. His grandsire is Tappet. He's already a better racehorse than his grandsire. If you think that Tis the Law won the Champagne as a 2-year-old, he won the Travers, he won the Belmont, which, yes, was earlier because of the pandemic. He was a very, very good racehorse. So I'm liking the Tis the Laws and also the McKinseys. I think the McKinseys are going to take a little bit more time. We've only seen a few of them. We're going to see more horses show up in April here at OBS because people point perhaps some of their more immature horses towards April to give them just a little bit of time. But on the whole, it's been good down here. And the main talk, and I don't want to start a whole nother conversation here, was Mike Rapoli blowing up Twitter the first day of the sales, saying he was not going to buy any racehorses down here. There's been a lot of action. You can just go and read all that for yourself. But I'm going to stand by the fact that the 2-year-old sales are the number one producers in the country of stakes winners, and they have the facts to prove it. We bought Corniche down here. Storm the Court we bought down here. We bought Collected down here. A lot of good horses come from these 2-year-old sales, and here we're here to buy. So, and I'm just speaking for myself, Moret Farrell, who I work for. We're quite happy to be down here.
The news last week on Justify and his Santa Anita Derby. I guess this will be the last chapter in it, but earlier in December, a judge ruled that, well, first of all, backing up, if you don't know, he tested positive for scopolamine. The California Horse Racing Board made the decision that it was, again, a hot topic, environmental contamination, so they would not take any action against him. Mick Ruiz, who had Bolt d'Oro, who finished second, right away started going through all sorts of channels to have this ruling overruled, saying, hey, he had the drug in his system. The rules say if you test positive for something, you're going to be disqualified. This was not the CHRB's finest hour. It, really looks like they tried to, sweep this under the rug and never even announced what was going on or told anybody what was going on. And they may not have ever done it if not for a newspaper story in the New York Times. But I guess, it doesn't take away anything from Justify. He was an absolutely great horse. But you can make the argument that he should have been disqualified from the Santa Anita Derby. The CHRB now is going to redistribute the purse so that Ruiz gets the winner's total of the 600,000 versus the second place total, which was 200,000. And Zoe, but I guess the question, and I'm not really clear what the answer is on this because of the timeline involved, but had the CHRB handled this the way that maybe they should have and have been more transparent about it, would he have been disqualified for the Santa Anita Derby, and therefore would he have not had any points, and therefore could he not have run? All right, Randy, you're shaking your head, so I'll go with you first. And therefore he would not have been able to run in the Kentucky Derby. I don't really know the answer. Maybe you do.
Well, I don't personally know the answer, but NBC Sports has a gentleman that I know you know by the name of Tim Layden, who's a multiple Eclipse Award winner. He's a fantastic investigative reporter about horse racing. He knows a lot about the sport. Years ago, when all this was first coming down, first being made public through the New York Times, he actually did a very exhaustive deep dive on the whole situation, including the aspect of this that you just mentioned. Could it have kept Justify from running in the Kentucky Derby? And what Layden found out was that Bob Baffert was notified about the positive 4 days before the Kentucky Derby. He exercised his right to have a split sample made, but that split sample could not have come back in time for the Kentucky Derby. So at that time, there was really no way that Justify would not have been allowed to run in the Kentucky Derby because the split sample hadn't verified the initial test. There were a lot of other things that he uncovered. It was clearly contamination. There were something like 7 different episodes of scopolamine positives during that period of time surrounding Justify Santa Anita Derby. They weren't as high a concentration as Justify had in his system, but Layden spoke to all sorts of different independent chemists and laboratory experts and veterinary experts, and they all 100% agreed that it was easily a case of contamination. Now, the question then becomes, the way I see it, guys, so if it was contamination, does that mean that the horse doesn't have to be disqualified, that they can actually leave the result of the Santa Anita Derby as is, or does, which they did rule, the CHRB ruled that initially, or does the contamination finding simply absolve the trainers of responsibility when it comes to suspensions or things like that? Obviously, the court judge ruled that a disqualification was mandated by California racing rules, and that's why we're at where we're at right now. But Zoe, it's been a big deal out there, I know.
We just close the book on that now. I'm tired of talking about contamination. It's just, I mean, Justify was brilliant. You can't take that away from him. He did everything. He won the Triple Crown. He was brilliant regardless, and he's a brilliant sire. It was contamination. Mick Ruiz got his $300,000, probably cost him $600 in lawyers' fees, because this has been going on for years. So, yeah, I'm done talking about that. It's over.
About the CHRB, the CHRB, in defending themselves, Bill, said that the way they handled this particular scopolamine case, as far as any sort of public statements or rulings, was consistent with the way they had handled other similar cases, meaning if they determined that it was a result of contamination and therefore it was not a positive and no action would be taken, they didn't go public with it.
Right.
Out of privacy to the trainers involved. They didn't want to besmirch their reputations if they were taking no action and if they decided it was actually not a positive because of contamination. But I still think, and I think you probably agree, that given the fact that it was Justify, given the fact that it was a Triple Crown winner, they should have been a little bit more PR conscious of the situation than they actually were.
Yeah. And that's one of the points here. And look, you know, again, and I'm going to use the contamination word that Zoe doesn't want to ever talk about again, but I have to say it. But I also think that in the end result, the court got it right. Now, I agree with you that the timeline, they never could have got this done in the 4 weeks between the Santa Anita Derby and the Kentucky Derby. So he was going to run in the Kentucky Derby no matter what. But in the end of the day, he tested positive for a medication, contamination, or contamination or not, he should have been disqualified. And I don't think the CHRB handled that well, and they messed this up in a lot of different ways. But maybe now this is the last of this, but it doesn't reflect badly on Bob Baffert. Wasn't his fault, and it certainly doesn't take anything away from Justify, who was a tremendous horse and is now turned out to be one of the leading sires in the sport.
And who tested cleanly after the Derby, after the Preakness, and after the Belmont.
The TDN Writers Room is brought to you by XBTV. It's free. You can log on every single day and just pick whichever workout you want. And this week, the XBTV workout of the week is Fierceness. Here he is working in company with stablemate Tuscan Sky at Palm Beach Downs on a muddy Friday morning. The pair were clocked going 5 furlongs in 1 minute and 4/5. While they do hit the wire together, you can easily see the gallop out and Fierceness just pulling away from Tuscan Sky. Looks like Johnny V is aboard Fierceness. And guys, I've been watching gallop outs all week and timing them, and this is a very, very good gallop out for Fierceness. We know he has an on and off again record, but I like what I'm seeing here from Fierceness for trainer Todd Pletcher in the XBTV Work of the Week.
all the thrills. Fraction of the bills. Experience the power of the partnership. Change your life, make new friends, and compete at the highest level of thoroughbred racing. West Point Thoroughbreds, the gold standard in racing partnerships. Visit westpointtb.com.
Meanwhile, the TDN Riders are brought to you by West Point Thoroughbreds. Depending on when you're watching this podcast, as expected, West Point either is or was heavily involved in the OBS March sale, looking for its next horses that will vault its partners into the world of instant camaraderie. Meanwhile, a past West Point OBS investment is hoping to make headlines at OP this weekend. That would be Jackson Traveler, who's entered at Oaklawn Park in the Grade 3 Whitmore Stakes on Saturday at 6 furlongs, bidding for his third stakes win since November. Jackson Traveler was purchased by West Point at OBS for $140,000 in 2020 during the pandemic. He would become that year's Maryland-bred champion 2-year-old and the next year's Maryland-bred champion 3-year-old. If you're interested in joining a West Point partnership and getting involved with cool horses like Jackson Traveler, you can learn more by visiting westpointtb.com.
Terry Finley's was right next to us yesterday. I actually saw him in the distance and I was like, is Randy here? I just saw this bald head and I'm like, oh, it's Randy. It was Terry Finley. So he's here with his whole crew and they will be big in action here at OBS all week. So yeah, you got doppelgangers everywhere. Rusty, Terry. It's the in thing. I might shave my head next week.
Terry was a Marine. I'm not that tough.
All right. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. That's a wrap on this week's show. I want to thank my cohorts, Randy Moss, Zoe Cadman, our Green Group guests of the week, Rusty Arnold, our producers, Katie Petruniak and Anthony LaRocca, and our editors, Aaliyah LaRocca and Nathan Wilkinson. Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. See you next week.